In this next video, we're just going to talk a little bit about how to support working memory. So will be kind of brief, but hopefully some of these techniques you'll already know, and it'll reinforce their use for your own learning. So let's take a bit of a deep dive here. So information in working memory must be actively maintained to ensure it can be easily retrieved. Remember, things break down quite quickly. So think of it like a circus performer spinning plates on poles. So you have a little, trying to spin that plate, or a basketball on your finger, right? Attention needs to continually revisit each plate to keep it spinning. Similarly, when your attention shifts away from the information that we're holding, the activation starts to fade. So as soon as you stop focusing on that one plate and you move to the next one, well, the original one will start to fade and slow down. Right? So what you have to do is keep them constantly active, or you might actually forget the information. So to keep this activation alive, we use rehearsal. So mentally repeating or refreshing the information. So there are two types of rehearsals. There's maintenance rehearsal, which involves repeating information over and over, such as saying a phone number in your mind or visualizing the information repeatedly. This repetition keeps the information active in working memory for as long as we can focus on it. But if we want to remember something more effectively, we need elaborative rehearsal. So this involves connecting new information with existing knowledge. So for instance, if I ask you to sort pictures, of dogs based on the code of color, so you might forget most of the images later. However, if I were to ask you to rate how likely each dog is to chase you while jogging, you would probably remember more images. So this is because you're deeply processing the image. So again, here are the photos of some dogs. And as I said, if I were to ask you, remember them based on colors of coat or cuteness, you might just look at them superficially. But if you're looking at dogs going, which ones are the most perceived threat, you're going to look a little bit more closely at their face and the size of their mouths and the size of them and how muscular they might be, right? So this is because you're deeply processing the image, analyzing features related to them based on personal experience, and focusing on their actual meaning. What do each of these features mean in terms of endangerment to yourself? So if I asked you to look at these and rank them in order based on threat level, you might actually remember more of these images later on. Another example of elaborative rehearsal would be meeting somebody at a party whose name is the same as your brother's. You don't need to repeat their name endlessly. Instead, you connect it to the memory of your brother. This connection deepens your processing and aids in creating long-term memory. So again, deeper you process information, that elaborative rehearsal, so relate it back to meaning or associate it with something else, will actually enhance its actual retention. And it's something that I usually use all the time as well. So the next, for retaining information, a next strategy is called chunking information. So look at the sequence of letters that I'm about to show you for 10 seconds. Close your eyes and then see how many you can actually recall. All right, don't cheat. So look at them for 10 seconds and then see how many you recall. Okay, now close your eyes and then can you actually recall what these letters are? It's pretty difficult, right? Now, but instead, if you remembered them individually, you would have a hard time, but grouping them into words and acronyms would make it much more simple. So these are the exact same letters that you had to remember before. Now give yourself 10 seconds and try to remember them. And then close your eyes, and will you be able to recall them? What you're doing is you've actually chunked the information into separate units. So instead of having to remember all of these at once, which would be about 15 letters, you only have to remember 5 individual units. So let's try some other examples. I'm going to read out some words. See how many you can actually remember. All right. So I'm going to read these out, these 12, and then see how many you can remember. Cake, book, shoe, car, ball, dish, clock, fish, tree, chair, bike, egg. Now try to pause the video and write down as many as you can actually recall. Here's the answers. Here's the list that I just read out. How many did you get? Now, so let's try this again, but with a new word list and see how many you can get. So I'm going to read the list. You're going to pause it, write down as many as you can, then we'll continue and compare our lists. So here we go. Dog, cat, pig, cow, grape, pear, orange, peach, shirt, pants, shoe, socks. Now pause and write down as many as you can. So here's the words that I just read out. In this activity, most people remember more words in the second list than they did from the first one. Typically, this is because people divide the words in the second list into 3 categories: animals, fruits, and clothes. So the use of these categories helps facilitate remembering. So it's a form of actual chunking. In contrast, the words on the first list cannot be grouped easily into categories. It is important to note that even though you are experienced with organizational strategies, younger children often organize inconsistently. Skillful use of organization requires extensive experience with different types of strategies. So as an educator, it's important, one, when you're trying to help somebody with memory, is to encourage chunking. Look for organizational strategies that you can then break things down into different subsections. The other is to process information at a deeper level. If you link it with past memory, past experiences, it'll help actually with your retention because you can utilize that past information. Like going to a party, someone says, "Hi, my name's Jamie," and it's like, "Oh, my brother's Jamie." So whenever I see that person, I'll think of my brother. I can remember the name. It's a shortcut into be able to offload some of that information from my working memory, and then I can utilize my long-term memory recall by that association with my brother. And so these types of strategies can really help people with their working memory as well. But it takes time, and these strategies need to be explicitly taught, especially if you're working with younger people, and you can't assume that they'll just know. So what we did is we've explored now through these series of videos how new stimulus are processed through our cognitive system. Initially, information is briefly held in sensory memory, where key features are identified. From there, selective attention moves the relevant information to working memory, as we can see here. So sensory memory, everything comes in, it's overwhelming, but the attention system says what's important, what gets filtered out, what to notice, what to think about, and it moves it to ignore short-term memory. It should be working memory, which is your workbench, where active processing happens before it's stored for long-term use. So one key takeaway is that working memory operates along 2 main paths: the visual and phonological paths, your visual spatial sketchpad and your phonological loop. As tasks become more complex, cognitive load increases until the processes are practiced enough to become automatic. This is where the role of rehearsal strategies becomes essential. Techniques like repetition, elaboration can help children process information more effectively and transition it to long-term memory. Finally, remember that these strategies are teachable. Reinforcing their use in a classroom can support learners in managing cognitive load and enhancing retention. It's also, I've also added some additional summary points in the Moodle or the Sway document for you to review and solidify your understanding. In the next video, we will be focusing on long-term memory and what are all the subsystems. So this section here is what we'll be focusing on next. Okay, see you in the next video.